Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. This is episode number 2, and I am your host. My name is Greg Huss, and this week I am joined by a new co-host. I'm joined by Greg Zumach. Greg, welcome to the show. Welcome to Cubs on Deck, man.
The other Greg. This is a Greg's only podcast. I'm excited to be here. I'm just excited to talk baseball. It's getting cold here in the Midwest, but it's still the baseball talk is hot. So
yeah, you're in the Midwest now, so that's fun. Getting to go some Iowa Cubs games next year. So if you guys are out there listening, if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, this episode should be up on YouTube. The last episode is up on YouTube as well. But I think that we're going to be able to get this going with having the video actually up there of our beautiful faces gracing the YouTube feed over at Northside Bound. So before I let you introduce yourself, Greg, and kind of give some background on you, I mean, it's kind of wild the support that we've had for the show over the past couple of weeks already. I mean, when we came out, and I know it helps having someone like Brian co-host that first episode and the poll he has and all that good stuff. But the outreach has been terrific. I can't thank everybody out there listening enough for tuning in and being interested in what we have to say. But yeah, Greg, I mean, this is a Greg's only show. You're new to the co-hosting reins here, and this is really your first like co-hosting of a show. You had your own podcast, but you want to give some background on yourself a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So, before I jump into myself, I just got to kind of throw back to you a little bit, because when this got brought up and like it was announced and everything, the outreach was amazing from everybody. And a lot of it was, we're so excited to have like you back on the air. So, I just got to give a shout out to you on that. And I'm excited to be a part of it. So for anybody who doesn't know me, I've been writing baseball just for a couple years. I started on my own site, ivyfutures.com, which is still out there. But pretty much all my content is really just on Northside Bound right now, which I write in collaboration with both Greg Huss and Todd Johnson and a few other contributors that are starting to get rolling here. So we're really excited about that. My main focus is the minor league and the draft. And that's kind of the draft has been where I've found a little bit more of my niche there. But frankly, I just love talking baseball. And sometimes you'll even see me like dive into some major league stuff, usually on Twitter. If it's still around by the time this episode airs, who knows, right? But you'll find me on some social media platform that maybe hasn't even been created yet. I don't know. But otherwise, yeah, just excited to talk baseball. We followed these minor league guys all year. And so now we can kind of celebrate a little bit of the successes in the off season and talk about 2023.
Yeah, and for listeners out there, like at this point, you've been introduced to the whole main hosting crew here. I mean, it's going to be me, Greg Zumach, and Brian Smith. So the trio, us three, will be kind of the main co-hosts here. Every once in a while, we'll get some broadcasters on to act as co-hosts with me. But I mean, this episode, we're doing every other week. I know that I don't think I explained on that first episode well enough that we're doing every other week, and we're releasing these episodes every other Tuesday during the off season, and every Tuesday during the season is the goal for this podcast. It might change along the way. That's the goal as of right now. I know that first episode was actually released on a Friday, but that was because the deadline for the Rule 5 editions got kind of moved back a little bit. So be looking out in your inbox, in your podcasting platform every other Tuesday for the off season. But really what we want to do now is the majority of this episode will be taken up by Talking Prospect List. That's what we love to talk about on the show. Anyways, it's a fun time. It kind of works out perfect that we have both dropped our prospect list for the second episode of this Cubs on Deck show. But before we do that, a little bit of housekeeping, I guess. The Cubs added some prospects to the 40-man roster. And we also got to talk. I know Brian and I talked a little bit about the Rule 5 draft that's coming up on December 7th. We'll talk about some guys that could potentially be poached away from the Cubs during that Rule 5 draft. But Greg, I mean, we saw 4 Cubs prospects get added to the 40-man roster, and really they weren't all that surprising either.
No, so a little behind the scenes, like we were talking on the Northside Bound Slack channel about who we thought was going to get added, and I had created a graphic with those 4. And I was like, I'll add it if there's another one. But we felt fantastic, and in the media, it was pretty widely reported that there's going to be the big 3. So Ben Brown, Brennen Davis, and Kevin Alcantara. those were like, there's something crazy, catastrophic would have had to have happened behind the scenes that we wouldn't have known about. And I think people would have gotten a tip off there. So we were pretty sure about those three. But I think collectively there was a growing consensus that Ryan Jensen was going to be that last one. And we can certainly talk about why that is, or like why we think that is, maybe if you want to dive into it. But we felt pretty good about it. So I actually created that graphic. I was ready to go. And so when it got announced, which is always after the deadline. Thank you, Cubs. Like, you can set your clock to it. It's always going to be like 10 minutes past. But yeah.
It is always. Every single announcement that ever comes is always after the deadline. So yeah, I mean, and you're right. Those big three, and then plus Ryan Jensen. And it's fun to see Ryan Jensen add. I think that it helps with Jensen. We detailed it on last episode that he has a little bit of clout with being that first round draft pick, right? He has a little bit of he's heralded a little bit higher. There's more money put into his development, obviously, by drafting him so high. But also the Cubs have put in a lot of effort to kind of tinker with who he is as a pitcher. And we saw that a lot this past year.
Totally. So the Ryan Jensen of second half of 2022 is not the Ryan Jensen of 2021. I mean, they're just like completely different pitchers. And I mean, this as well. And total props for you, because you've been actually one of the guys that's the highest on Ryan Jensen. So like, I think you're totally been right on this. But the tools were always there. The velocity was always there. Things were vicious. Control, command, they weren't there. And he still thinks he needs to work on. But it was always this like one seam, two seam fastball. And it had just this incredible life to it. And it's so cool. But like, that was it. And then he goes to the development list. He comes back with a really good cutter. One that he can use for strikes or for whiffs. Like land in the zone or to generate whiffs. The slider's really looking good. I think the four-seam fastball, I think those are probably the big three that I like to watch now. He's got a shortened arm swing, which is something we've been talking about for a couple of years. He's just looking good. Mm-hmm. I'm excited for Ryan Jensen. I think he's worked his tail off and he's put himself in a really good spot.
Do you think this means that he's going to be converted to the bullpen this year, or do you think they ride it out a little bit longer as a starter?
I was originally thinking just write it out as a starter, right? Like if you're going to commit the 40-man spot, just give him, at least through June or something, right? Mm-hmm. And then I was really surprised because there was a really good article. They have a lot of these, but a really good article by Sahadev Sharma and Patrick Mooney at the Athletic, where they specifically talk about like the Cubs wouldn't rule out bringing him back as a starter in the future, but it's probably this multi-inning reliever role that they've been liking to debut guys. So I don't know. I mean, that's not like a firm statement, but that's a pretty strong statement coming from Sahadev and Patrick. So like, I guess they might have heard something behind the scenes.
Yeah, and for the Cubs to even let that out at all, that they're considering the bullpen is that's a big thing to kind of let leak out there, So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see that multi-inning reliever, and there's a lot of value in doing that. There's a lot of value, and we've seen Cubs pitchers recently with Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson go to the bullpen, work as a multi-inning reliever, work as a single-inning reliever if you need to, and then get converted back to the starting rotation. I'd call for the Cubs to do that for far too long. Frankly, for guys that didn't really deserve it. I had been calling for them to do that, and they didn't really do that until Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson. But I love it now. I'm about it. I think it would work really well with Ryan Jensen. I think they should absolutely try that. So I don't know. Yeah. Is there anything else with the other three guys you want to hint at all, or you want to get into some of the guys that might get selected away?
Maybe just a quick one-liner on each of. I mean, Brennen Davis, and he was the shoe-in, and we'll talk prospect list. You still have him as one. I still have him as two. I mean, we think the world of Brennen. That was even with an injury. That was just such an obvious thing. Ben Brown is a guy that if fans had kind of checked out when all the trade rumors went down this summer, totally understandable, right? But he might be a guy that people aren't as familiar with. Power arm starter.
Top 10 prospect in the system for sure with Ben Brown.
Yes, I think so. I think it's very actually he might be just shy on that for me. I can't quite. No, I think he's 10. I think he's 10. Perfect.
I got him at 9. You got him at 10. Yep.
Made the cut. Power arm. Probably the big question is he's got such power stuff that they're probably, and this has been reported a few different places, probably going to try to differentiate that curve from that slider a little bit more. So, but I mean, The building blocks are there.
And I'll throw in with Ben Brown.
Yeah.
It's so important, and I think I detailed this on my prospect list, that it's so important, Ben Brown, that there exists such a thing as a devastating slurve. Like that exists.
Yep.
It just
Yep.
isn't very common. Like you very rarely do you see a really good and when it's not a really good slurve, then it's not really useful, you know? And so that's why a lot of times when we talk about differentiating between the curveball and the slider and making them two separate pitches, it's because like the hit rate, not like how often a guy is getting a hit off it, but like the success rate for a slurve and for a plus slurve is just like that very rarely happens. So maybe Ben Brown is that very unique, incredible slurve. I don't know. I don't know about that yet. And so that I think you're more likely to have success with a separate curve and a slider than a really, really good slurve. And that's kind of where it lands with Ben Brown, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a guy that's done really well in AA. So like it's not a surprise. Like his stuff is still good. The other thing is he had this splitter that he hasn't like thrown. And that's kind of a really intriguing pitch. So, you know, I think the building blocks are there to do some really cool stuff. Kevin Alcantara is a guy that, I mean, we think the world of as well, and pretty far away, but one of those where it's like, it doesn't matter that he's only going to be in high A next year. Like you got to protect this guy because like he is just superstar potential. So you just can't screw around there.
Yeah, no team would even hesitate to pick him up in the Rule 5 draft, add him to their Major League roster, and just really do whatever. I mean, like he could get at bats at the Major League level. They could sit him on the bench literally the entire year long. It doesn't. They would develop him in a different way, and then the following year send him back down to AA or AAA and call it a day.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why you see the addition of Kelvin Alcantara, and with that, I mean, there are some players still in this Cubs system that were not added to the 40-man roster that are Rule 5 eligible that we could see get taken away from the Cubs come December 7th. Is there anybody that you have like top of your list in terms of risk at losing to another team?
I'm going to throw out something that like the person I pick is not going to be a surprising one, but let me just say, and I think I think very highly of him, but I'm almost even hoping it happens. And that's Cam Sanders getting taken because like the Cubs have a ton of bullpen depth. I just want the guy to get a legit shot. Like that's kind of where I'm with. I just want him to get a shot.
I was talking about it I went on with Mike on the Cubs PS Plus podcast recently, and I was talking about this weird feeling I have about the Rule 5 draft where you and I, like, we cover these Cubs minor leaguers from the day they're drafted, for you before they're drafted sometimes, until they reach the major leagues. And what we want from these guys, we're Cubs fans first, and then we also love following the system. We love keeping fans informed on what's going on in the system, all that good stuff. But I want more than anything for these guys to succeed in the minor leagues and go make it up to the big leagues with the Cubs in an ideal world and kill it, right? So when this Rule 5 draft comes around, I have such mixed emotions because if a Cubs guy gets selected and gets to a major league roster, it's like I'm so happy. Like it sucks that he's no longer on the Cubs, but like I am so like if Cam Sanders gets selected, that is awesome. That's all because I want them to make the Cubs or make the major leagues with the Cubs, but a good backup plan is to make the big leagues with literally 29 other teams. I'm about that. I'd be so excited for Cam Sanders or any of these guys if they get selected away.
Yeah, I would. Well, I think there's a few guys that are probably like a little bit lower, where I would be really worried if they got taken. That might really derail their development. Like, yes, they make it to the majors. That's a huge accomplishment. They deserve all the credit in the world. But it's like, ooh, like Yohendrick Panango. He's far down there. Like, if he were to try to get thrown into the major leagues, that would be really hard. Major leagues are hard anyway, but like that's really hard.
Yeah.
So those are guys that it's like, ooh, I kind of hope they're not taken just for their own personal benefit there. But yeah, I mean, there's some guys on, and I don't mean to, when I say these things, I don't want it to come off like rude or anything. There's guys that like on the periphery. This is a deep system. So you've got players that like aren't even going to be on our player ranking list that are just darn good players. So some of these guys that, you know what, they just need it. They just need a legit shot. Like go out there, get it, prove it, you know, live your dream. And I'm happy for you. Yeah.
So you mentioned Cam Sanders. Is there anybody
Yep.
else that kind of it would be, I guess, not as surprising if they were selected?
The one that I've been trying to ask around about is Cole Franklin. And I get kind of mixed reactions because I don't want to like shoot messages to people like, hey, do you think you'd take like who on the Cubs would you take? Right. You're kind of casting a wide net.
Yeah.
But like I'll ask like pointed questions like, hey, like if Cole Franklin was
In
available in the
theory.
Rule 5, like what do you think there?
You're like saying in theory, and it's like that's a real thing that's happening.
But it was, yeah. And admittedly, some of these conversations were before when we were like making our little round table for Northside Bound, because I was trying to figure out like who would I think from a baseball side. And I got kind of like mixed reactions. Like big velocity guy. Love Cole. We saw him go from, it's always been one of my favorite prospects, and a great dude. But we've seen him go from like, ooh, like tantalizing potential to like, oh man, he's like hitting 100, like 96, 99. That's hard to control. But like velocity is big. And, I kind of talked about this a little bit. Like if this is the year that he were to get like a slider, maybe maybe that clicks with him. All of a sudden, that's just a guy that you just put in the pen for a year. So I don't know. That's probably the one that is like, if that happens, I'm gonna sit there and go like, I was worried that might happen.
Yeah.
Happy for the dude, but worried that might happen. How about you? What do you think?
I'll go the other route a little bit because I know that
Yep.
Cole Franklin is a good example of a high upside guy that might get selected. I'll go the other route, and because I didn't bash him, but I wasn't the kindest to Darius Hill's odds of making the 40-man roster last episode.
Okay.
There's a clear role that he would have on a major league team,
Yep.
and that means something in the Rule 5 draft, right?
Yep.
Your teams are scouring the available pool of players for the highest upside, but also if Darius Hill can slot in and right now be your number 5, your fifth outfielder, that's exactly what he can be. And a team that has value to a team and having a fit. Now, does he have potential of being anything greater than a fourth outfielder? Like maybe not, but that's still a valuable role as that fourth or fifth outfielder. So I look at Darius Hill as being a potential guy that's selected away. Another guy that is just so intriguing to me, man, and I can't figure it out, is Chase Strumpf.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Brian and I kind of voiced our opinions and how high we are of Chase Strumpf as a prospect. And it's just like he performed very well in terms of offensive production in Double-A last year. But he did it in just like a way that doesn't seem very sustainable at the major league level, right? He struck out 33% of his at-bats. He didn't hit for a high average, but he was hitting for power. But we know that Chase Strumpf is a guy that when he was drafted for that hit tool. Yeah. So, like, for me, I'm holding out hope that he can still maintain some of that pop that he has now, but bring back that hit tool into the mix a little bit. And I think if another team thinks that they can do that, that's another guy, kind of like Ryan Jensen, where it's like Chase Strumpf was a second-round draft pick. He was drafted with a lot, like he was drafted at UCLA. This is not some like 16th round pick that is just kind of like found his way onto people's radars. Like he's always been on the radar. So he's been scouted by other teams a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if a team selected Chase Strumpf. I don't expect that to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised. So those are the kind of like on the hitting side of things, which is also, I have to note that like hitting is it's much more rare, I guess, to see a hitter taken in the Rule 5 draft than a guy you can store in your bullpen as a righty arm.
So, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. Historically, it is. I guess the wrinkle this year is that because we didn't have one last year, right? We didn't have a Rule 5 draft for anybody who's not familiar with this. And just in case you listen to this and you don't remember what the Rule 5 draft is, you should listen to episode 1 because I bet they went through it. But you can select a player that's not on somebody's 40-man roster who's eligible. They have to stick on the major league roster for the entire year. And so historically, those have been a bunch of pitchers, right? Because you got a whole bunch of pitchers, just stuff them on. Bullpens are hard to build really good bullpens, right? So like if he's your 7th reliever, like who cares, right? If you bring him in a game where you're losing by 6, whatever. Yeah. And maybe you catch lightning in a bottle and you can pick up some really good pitchers there. But there used to be no rule on how many pitchers you could have on your roster. And so people go like 13, 14, 15, and now it's like capped at 13. So I wonder if we might see these fifth outfielders, like speedy defensive guys. If you need to pick up a backup shortstop, instead of paying Andrelton Simmons $4 million, I think that was about it, you could pick up somebody else for super cheap if you feel confident in their defensive ability and just say, hey, you're just a backup shortstop. You know, like a Nico Horner goes down with an injury for 2 weeks. We've got somebody competent that can play there.
Yeah. Go bat 180. That's fine, but just play shortstop.
Totally.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I'm curious, but like, I agree with you. And there's a really good account that's out there right now. Tyrion 711. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but he's just fantastic to follow. Writes for Prospects Live for now, and does some really, really good work on prospects throughout the league. And so he threw out there like a whole bunch of names that are like, these are some notable names for the Rule 5. Like, watch out for these guys. These like caught my eye right away. I went through that whole list, not one Cub. Now, I wouldn't say like he would speak for all major league teams, right? Like, I think the Cubs will have somebody selected there. I would guess 1 to 2. But it was notable to like look at that and not see like a whole bunch of Cubs litter that list. And with all these teams in a roster crunch and 2 Rule 5 drafts coming into one, I don't know, man. I'll be interested to see if like how creative teams get here.
Yeah, like it's kind of fun talk. Like it's always fun talking about this topic every single year. It's especially fun this year because like we like no joke, we have not seen something like this ever because we haven't had 2 Rule 5 draft classes all compiled into one draft. And that's what we're seeing this year. So like it could get crazy, it could get wild. It's going to be interesting to see how 40-man rosters look and how many slots are available for certain teams too, because the Cubs might go out and get somebody. I don't have anybody off the top of my head that I want the Cubs to poach. Do you know, was Jake Mangum for the Mets, was he protected?
Ooh. That's a really good question.
I kind of think Jake Mangum was not protected, and we're going to continue on as if he was not protected. That's a guy I want the Cubs to go after, Jake Mangum.
Perfect.
Because, are you looking it up right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's available. He's
okay.
Protected.
I want the Cubs to go after Jake Mangum in the Rule 5 draft.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
For a team that is looking for a defensive center fielder, there's all these rumors about Cody Bellinger. There's rumors about Michael Taylor. There's rumors about
Dominic Fletcher, my man.
Dominic, yeah. There's all these different defensive center fielders that the Cubs are looking at as like kind of holdover for Brennen Davis when he proves himself in AAA, Alexander Canario when he comes back healthy, Pete Crow Armstrong when he debuts, all that good stuff, right?
Yep.
Kind of a holdover in center field. Jake Mangum could be that guy. He's the all-time SEC hits leader in college. He played for Mississippi State. He's a plus defensive center fielder. He's got some speed, and he made it all the way up to AAA, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
this past year for the Mets.
Yep.
The Mets didn't protect him. I think Jake Mangum could potentially fill that void, fill that role in center field for the Cubs in 2023.
Yeah, I love it. That's actually really, really good because I've seen a few clips of him defensively that they've wowed me. And I was doing a deep dive on who are the best minor league center fielders, looking for like Dominic Fletcher and all these other people. And so like he kept coming up. Like he's done some pretty impressive stuff.
And he's the son or nephew. I think he's the son. Mike Ernst pointed this out to me, the son of a former Bears player. So, I mean, it just makes sense.
There you go. Draft him. The guy I like is Thad Ward from Boston. Really impressive profile. Had some injury issues, but like he's been really good, a little bit older. He is a guy that you can just put plug and play right as these like depth long relievers. And the Cubs are building a lot of them. So like you might think like, well, they don't really need that. And you're right. My thing with the Rule 5 is it costs like nothing, very little. Bring them into spring training. See what these guys look like. Maybe somebody is popping an extra 2 miles per hour that you don't know about in the winter and nobody knows about this. That somebody ate their Wheaties and they're popping 97 instead of 95. So like I'd rather just bring these people in. If Jake Magnum can hang down hang on to a role, I think that'd be great, man.
Yeah, I'm all about that. So it should be. Moral of the story is the Rule 5 draft, December. I'm getting that date right, December 7th, right?
Yeah,
December 7th should be a fun day to follow prospects and follow that draft and all that good stuff. So
that's right.
All right, man. You want to get to the meat and potatoes of this episode here? Okay.
Do it.
So as I mentioned, to kind of open up the show, both Greg and myself released our newest top prospect list over at northsidebound.com. You guys can go out there and check them out. By the time this episode drops, both mine and Greg's, as well as Todd Johnson's, and our kind of collective, comprehensive list for Northside Bound will be released. It will be on the website. Go check that out. I want to kind of go through as we're sitting here. We're recording this on November 21st, so it's a little bit earlier than what this episode is going to come out. And I want to point out, we're not going to go through because we went deep on these lists, right? I got 40 names, and Zumach, you got 38 names. So we are not, it makes for bad podcasting for us to just go and list out all these names. We're not going to do that. What we are going to do,
best podcast.
What we are going to do is just point out some players that we were very, very similar on, had ranked the exact same. And we're also going to point out and make some comments on some guys that we were very, very different in how we rated them. I think that before we get into all of this and we start going down these lists, I do want to point out something that you pointed out previously, is that we have different number one prospects in the system. I have Brennen Davis ranked number one, and then you have PCA ranked number one. I don't know, did you have PCA in your midseason, or is this a new thing for you having PCA here?
I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah,
okay.
I made the change to mid-season. And so part of that was we were not getting a ton of information on Brennen. Like it was back injury, but like no one really knew anything at that point. And so I was a little bit more cautious on him. But yeah, I did make the switch. It was a tough call. I'm okay with it. We're still talking like the way I rank them into tiers. I still view both of those guys as future all-star potential.
Yeah, and I at this point, so I stated the claim on the previous show that I hosted with Jimmy with Jimmy Nelligan, that I made the claim that I will not. I don't want to sleep on Brennen Davis, right? I said this earlier in the mid-season prospect updates, that I did not want to sleep on Brennen Davis. I didn't want to go have all this time without seeing him play, then hit the off season where we can kind of lose track of what happened during the season. And then opening day hits this upcoming in 2023 and be like, oh, well, like what happened to Brennen Davis? I feel very confident that he's the number one prospect, but I do want to see how he returns from having, I don't expect him to go off in the very first week of the season. That's not, or the very first month of the season, it's going to take some time to come back. He's returning from a lot of missed time. He has hardly played in the minor leagues, dude. Like he has gotten very few plate appearances in the minor leagues, but I still really have a whole lot of faith in that bat, both his hit tool and his power. I think the power is off the charts. I'm a big believer in that, and his ability to be super athletic and have some speed, run the bases very well, play some good right field. And I know he's a center fielder, but play some good right field. I have a lot of confidence in that. And at the same time, I absolutely understand having PCA as your number one prospect in the system. And that's not even necessarily a slight on Brennen Davis. It's the fact that PCA came out and tore it up the entire year. I mean, like I've pointed this out several times. Like he was my pick for Cubs minor league hitter of the year this year. And my thing is that his offensive numbers were not far off of Matt. Obviously, Matt Mervis had better offensive production. PCA wasn't too far off. Meanwhile, he was also playing Gold Glove center field, stealing a bunch of bases, looking smooth, looking great. I get PCA as the number one prospect in the system.
Yeah. So there was the injury to Brennen, and I think he comes back pretty well on it into next year. Like it didn't tank it too much for me. I got to admit, just PCA just went out and took it from me. And again, these are guys that I both think they have all-star potential on. I just was so impressed with how PCA came up to, so he just totally killed it in low A, went up to high A. That's a huge adjustment. Had a couple weeks where he was riding it, and then totally turned it on, totally made the adjustments. The other thing too is I really can't discount the fact of how valuable PCA is. with power. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
We were talking about, like, man, if this guy could get below average power, he'd be really good. It's like, what, 16 home runs this year? Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's just a really valuable profile, and I'm excited for both of those guys.
And the low floor or the high floor, in addition to all of that, right? Is that like he plays Gold Glove center field. He's fast as hell.
Yep.
He has that floor regardless.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but like the Cubs acquired him, and people were like, he's Albert Almora. He's not Albert Almora. Totally different profile. In fact, he's hit more home runs this year, PCA, than Albert Almora has ever had in a year, and it was like not close.
Yeah.
It's just a different profile, and like PCA is just he's kind of a stud. I was on the CHGO, telecast, I guess, episode where they asked me like, all right, who are you? Plant your flag that this is the guy like that's gonna ride us into the next championship. And I was like, it's PCA, and that's not a knock on Brennen. I love Brennen. I use the term Brennen Davis is the truth. Like, I believe it. So yeah.
I do want to go down this list. So we covered the top two guys. We both have the same number 3 prospect, so that's worth digging into. We both have Kevin Alcantara as the number 3 prospect in the system, and I think we can probably both agree that he has the highest upside of anybody in the system. I made the comment that you had to speak to on the CHGO show that I think that Kevin Alcantara could be a top, what did I say, top 20, I think. I think he could be a top 20 prospect in all of baseball by the end of next season. I really believe that. I mean, I think that upside for Kevin Alcantara is through the roof, man. The power is crazy. He plays a good center field. Another guy like Brennen Davis who can move to right field if need be. But I think Kevin Alcantara can stick in center field. We'll see how he puts on some more muscle because he has plenty of muscle to add, which is scary to think about. If he can add more muscle to the power he already has. Kevin Alcantara is just like upside through the roof.
Totally. Like you're right. Like, he may just age out of center field, but for the time being, he plays a really good center field. And he's superstar potential. Like, I don't know if true upside. I mean, maybe somebody could make a case for Christian Hernandez. I don't have a problem with that argument, but like we're splitting hairs. Kevin Alcantara is showing it in low A. He looks like he's going to be an absolute stud. Like, I'm so excited.
Yeah, I think that if you're creating a prospect list and you have anybody, if you have Kevin Alcantara anywhere lower than 3, you're doing it wrong, I think.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're like really buying the pitchers, that's the only thing I can, but otherwise I'm with you, man. Kevin Alcantara, stud, future all-star. So
and then I think at that point, if you're buying the pitchers, I think you're buying the pitching development in the system. Yes. Like you're buying the pitchers to a certain degree, but you're buying the development system even more so, All right, moving down the list. We can actually go to your number 4 guy here. We're just going down your list. You have Matt Mervis at number 4, which is exceptionally high considering looking at my list where I have Matt Mervis at 12. Now, I guess, why do you like Matt Mervis so much? And then I'll go into why. I think I surprisingly did not take a whole lot of heat for having Matt Mervis at 12, but I'll kind of defend my position down there. What's your thoughts on Matt Mervis at 4, which is pretty high, the highest I've seen?
So, I mean, and I break these off into tiers. So like 4 is the same as like 8 or something right around there. And so at that point, we're pretty much splitting hairs. It's not that far off. I think there's value in how near you are to the majors, to an organization, right? Like, yes, the Cubs could trade Christian Hernandez, and some team would be like, hell yeah, we'll take him. But I'm not saying Matt Mervis is more valuable than Christian Hernandez. But if you are a team that's like, or I could get a shortstop that's in AA or AAA, there is more value there. There is just less risk. I think Matt Mervis hits. I think the Matt Mervis like hype train has gone a little bit off the rails. I had some people who I absolutely respect. I think they're great, but they were kind of sending me messages. They're like, I think he's like a 3 or like a 4-win player next year. And I was like, that just doesn't happen very often. Like, if you look at Goldschmidt, Rizzo, Friedman, it just doesn't happen.
It's such like such bad expectations being set on Matt Mervis. It makes me so sad, man. It makes me like actually sad.
Yeah, I think he hits really well. there's going to be some adjustments. I think him just being near to the majors helps. I'm kind of just buying the decreasing K rate as well, which I think is a pretty big thing. Also, I did get just a peek at some of the data, and I was surprised at how well he handled breaking pitches. I think he handled them better than I thought he did. Which I'm not going to comment on any of the he only hits batting practice fastballs or hanging breaking balls or whatever it was. That was not the case, and I mean, I've seen enough data that is not the case. So like, I don't know. I think there's enough there that I'm intrigued, but really, I mean, 4 to 12 is not actually that crazy in how deep of a system this is.
Yeah, I agree. And the reason why I have him down at 12 is simply because he, by no fault of, I mean, basically by no fault of his own, he plays first base.
Yep.
And if you play first base, you have to hit. Like you have to hit. And if you go back and look at you can sort the MLB pipeline by position over the years, like the top 10 first basemen over the years. Go back and look at the top 10 first basemen on MLB pipeline over the past 8 years. Outside of like Pete Alonso and
Torkelson.
Well, really, at this point, we haven't seen Torkelson do anything in the big league. So, like, outside of Pete Alonso, there aren't very many top first base prospects, if you want to call them that produce at the major league level. It just doesn't really happen because you have like those top prospect lists for first baseman don't really mean a whole lot to me. What I like is that he's mashing, no pun intended, in AAA. I love that. That's what and how he improved throughout the year. How the strikeout rate went down, the walk rate got a little bit better. I all of that. I love all of that about Matt Mervis. He just has to hit at the major league level because if he doesn't have like a 120 WRC plus, then he doesn't have value. Like he can't possibly be that like even a 2-win player. And
no. Yeah,
that's scary. You know, that's scary in terms of me ranking him. And that's why I have him at 12. I don't not think that I still think that he can be a good productive major league hitter. I don't think we should put that expectation on him in his rookie season. I don't think that we should put 150 WRC plus expectations on him ever. But I do think he can be a productive major league player.
Yeah, he just has literally no floor, right? Yeah. Like he has to hit or he doesn't. Or at the very least, he hits lefty and he hits for power. So like he's probably a guy that sticks in the majors regardless, like a little bit, or he just goes overseas and demolishes like some league over there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a thing, right? Like, I mean, let me preface this by saying that Matt Mervis is not this guy I'm about to name drop, but part of me in the back of my head still has this like Brian LaHair memory sticking around in my head. I know Brian LaHair was an all-star for a year for the Cubs. Like, I get that, but like, I just have that Brian LaHair memory, you know? So, I think Matt Mervis is better than Brian LaHair. I think Matt Mervis has potential to be better than Dan Vogelbach, who keeps getting comp to him. Rowdy Tellez, I know, is a comp for him, but I'm skeptical to put him at number 4 on the list. But I understand why you have him there for sure.
You know, the interesting thing before we switch off here is the Rowdy Tellez thing got a lot of flack. The Dan Vogelbach thing got a lot of flack. But if you look at the only thing that's causing those guys to not look like really good performers is the fact that they play defense and they play defense poorly. And so they're definitely designated hitters at best or bad first baseman. Because they're consistent like 120 WRC plus, 110 WRC plus, which is above average. And so I think Mervis can do that. There's some internal optimism that he's better at first base than some of those guys. So like, but I'm with you. Like, I think that's a totally fair point. I'm not going to throw out the pitchforks or call for your head. I think that's totally fair.
And I surprisingly didn't take a whole lot of heat for that 12th ranking. So I appreciate all the fans out there reading because that was surprising. All right, moving down the list, we can skip over a few names here. I want to get to number 11, who is Daniel Palencia. We both have Daniel Palencia at number 11. I mean, arguably the best stuff in the entire system.
Oh, I think he has the best stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have I've never put an 80 grade on somebody, and I've been doing this for a couple of years, so like we don't need to pop a champagne
In
bottle
your
or anything,
whole
right?
2 years.
My whole career, but I don't think I would ever put an 80 grade on anything. Like even when Braylon Marquez was in the system and people were like, he's throwing 102 plus, I did not put an 80 grade on that. It was a hittable fastball. Daniel Palencia's fastball is straight out of hell. Like that is vicious. It is a weapon of mass destruction right there. And so like the fact that somebody has that kind of a pitch, anything, is unbelievable. Then you add some of his breaking stuff to it. Like it's sick. Honestly, I'm still wondering if he's just a pen arm through, again, no fault of his own. And so like that's what's got him sitting at 11 and not, like 4 or 5. But that stuff is ridiculous.
I have some confidence that he can stay as a starter, man. I know that like I think that he could next year be up in Chicago as a bullpen arm. I have a little bit of confidence in him being a starter. I think that I know he's shorter, but he's not small. I mean he's thick. He's a thick boy.
Thick. Yeah.
And I think that has value to his starting potential. He holds that velo deep into games. Where he leans reliever risk is just if he can't control that 102 mile an hour fastball and 93 mile an hour slider, which is crazy to even say out loud. But if he can't control that stuff enough, then it goes to the bullpen. But he's not a guy he doesn't have pinpoint command, and he doesn't even really have good control even, but he has significantly better control than some of the other guys in the system that like, I favor his control even over Ryan Jensen at this point. And I'm a big Ryan Jensen guy, but I think that there's still reason to just keep running him out there as a starter, see how much deeper he can get into starts. And I don't know, man, I'm a believer in Palencia, the starting pitcher.
Yeah. I'm curious what they do from an off-speed standpoint, because his stuff is so ridiculous that if he were to add like a decent, I mean, we're not talking average, but like a below average or interesting right around there splitter, or which the Cubs have been kind of like toying with, intrigued with or whatever with splitters, man, if he did like a splitter split change or something like that stuck, that is, I mean, okay, I'm going to get so much heat for this, but that's like DeGrom level potential, right? Like you're talking 102 fastball, 93 slider, and then like a splitter that falls off the table. If you get something like that, that's insane. That is super hyperbole, but like we're talking all-star starter if that sticks.
Just lock Daniel Palencia and Luis Devers in a room together until Devers teaches Palencia you're right. Just combine the. I mean, if Daniel Palencia and Luis Devers combined into one pitcher, would that be that'd be the number one prospect in all of baseball for sure, right?
It'd be probably pretty close. Basically, it would be the Marlins Yuri Perez actually.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. I love that. All right, we got another guy in common here. If we go down the list here, and at 14, we both ranked Alexander Canario at 14. Super difficult guy to rank. Super. And I'll admit that I dropped him about 6 or 7 slots. I wasn't going to rank him as a top 5 guy in the system. I was not. But the injury did drop him down 6 or 7 slots for me. I'm concerned. And not only am I concerned about the ankle or the ankle injury, broken ankle from this winter, I'm also concerned about that shoulder injury. And I feel like because the ankle was so gruesome that we've kind of painted over that shoulder, but I believe that's a shoulder that he's had problems with in the past, correct?
He did.
And that just worries me a little bit. And I hate that an injury in the off season is taking him down 7 slots for me or whatever it might be, because the power is the best in the entire system. It's better than Matt Mervis's. I mean, Matt Mervis has great power, but like the pure raw power is the best in the system. He's a freak athlete. He's got a great arm out there in right field. He can play a decent. Like he's got a lot of qualities of Brennen Davis, man, but just like maybe even more explosive and more volatile, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he's even a guy that like I think you could play him in center. He was the Canario is the one that is absolutely crushing, because when I've been doing a whole bunch of like mock off-season stuff, like here's a thread on like some guy the Cubs should target, and in many of these discussions for trades, it was like, hey, Canario is the guy that you could move right now. He is a team could look at him and say, all right, maybe he doesn't start the year, but like by May, he's our center fielder. And so that's a really valuable thing. And it could have been valuable to the Cubs too. Now it still can. Like I'm not like off. We both ranked him 14th, right? Like we're not off the bandwagon there. But the athleticism scares me. The healing scares me. Man, I put him in like 6 different places as I was like working through this list, because and like he is a guy that I was trying to like ask around. I couldn't get anything on him because people were like, no idea.
I feel like there's a lot. You know what makes Christopher Morel so exciting as a player and so explosive and such a good athlete, and what makes him a good prospect and now a quality major league player in whatever role he ends up taking on? Those qualities I see in Alexander Canario, where that explosiveness and that just those same qualities I see in Canario. And I'm with these injuries, I'm worried about that he loses those qualities, and then what's left over is a left fielder instead of a right fielder, or instead of a center or right fielder, and a guy that has good power but not insane power. And it's like, if he's striking out 30%, he's a righty. Like that just worries me a little bit. And now, with that being said, he could come back from this injury and get right back to his normal self. And then this 14, I think 14 is kind of hedging our bets in either way, right? He could come back and just not be himself anymore and really drop down into like the 20s and 30s as a prospect ranking. He could come back as his exact same self and be the 6th ranked player in the system easy, and that's the trickiness. And I think we have that same issue with Ed Howard to a certain degree. And I know that I have Ed Howard ranked a little bit higher than you. I have Ed Howard at number 23, and you have Ed Howard at number 29. And I think there's a lot of similarities there, where Ed Howard has this hip injury that is not a common injury to have. You see some ankle injuries, you see shoulder, elbow, but hip injuries in baseball like this, that doesn't happen ever.
No, it's pretty bad. Yeah.
I'm just a little concerned about him returning back, and it just makes it very, very difficult to rank guys like this that are injured in this way. If a guy goes down with Tommy John, we've seen Tommy John before. Like we've seen guys come back from Tommy John. So my ranking of Tyler Schlafer does not decrease an extreme amount. Like it did a little bit because he went down with Tommy John, but like I know how a guy can return from Tommy John. I don't know how these two guys, Canario and Howard, are going to return from these injuries.
Nope. I have no clue. I mean, there's some literature out there available to it, but like, and these teams have more information, but the way that these surgeries and injuries are there is like, there is differences in different types of procedures. There's differences, like not every Tommy John is the same, like there's a range and stuff. So it is very difficult to figure out. I didn't know how to rank either of these guys. I mean, Howard's defensive position makes me feel a little bit better. Like I still feel pretty good about him, but yeah, it's really tough.
Yeah.
So tough.
So going through this top 14 now with Canario there, that's where those are all fairly similar. Us 1 through 14. I mean, we had that difference in Matt Mervis, but besides that, 1 through 14 were pretty similar across the board. After that is when it starts getting a little crazier for comparing my list versus yours. We can start with Luis. We've already talked about Luis Devers a little bit. You have Luis Devers as the 15th best prospect in the system. I have him down at 22. For me, it's just I don't want to knock it because still 22 is still good. It's just I want to see the stuff play at a higher level. I want to see the stuff in the high majors, because we know the pitchability is off the charts with Luis Devers. We know he has a nasty changeup. And you'd be hard pressed to find a guy who appreciates a good changeup more than me. But I also understand that a changeup can't be your main out pitch. And so, but there's something to be said about the way he pitches.
Yeah, I agree. So I mean, mine's in the same tier as right around where you are too.
Hmm.
So I think we're again kind of in that same range there. Um, I think that there were two things that led me to at least be a little bit more intrigued. One is the fact that there were kind of some reports that he was starting to touch a little bit higher in the velocity. And if you were to look at, and I don't want to completely just steal like drive lines, the blob, if they use a Stuff Plus tool to kind of evaluate pitches, and then they toss it up in this graphic, and then they show you like what's a good pitch, what's a bad pitch. It's a really cool little tool. But the difference in what somebody looks like when they're throwing 92 for a fastball and where like horizontal and vertical movement are and
Hmm.
how successful that is compared to somebody that throws 95, 96 is very different. There is a whole lot different colors on that. So there were some reports that he was touching a little bit higher. And I think going into the year two, I was asking about Devers, and there was some like, hey, we think he's got some more in there. So again, kind of hedging my bet a little bit. I don't care that he was the Cubs minor league player of the year. I know that there were a lot of people that were like, how did he not get Rule 5 protected? Added to the 40 man. Like the Cubs are going to lose him. And it's like, I don't think so personally. Maybe they do, but then Godspeed. Like, that's
But then if
great.
they do, then I can clip this video and be like, Zumach is the reason why Cubs
Yeah,
lost him. So
that's it.
it's a win-win, really.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you come out ahead completely. I've just been texting people the whole night, like, just take him. No, I don't know. But yeah, so like same tier as where you ranked him for me, and just maybe a little bit upside. He looks like he could add some velo. Like maybe I'm just projecting that on him. So I don't know. I guess that's where I am.
Yeah, and I think that he's like we covered on the last episode. He's just a super interesting case for the Rule 5 draft because we know he's performed very, very well. But moving down a little bit, I am a little bit higher on Drew Gray than what you are. I have Drew Gray
Mm.
ranked 17. You have Drew Gray down at 31. And really, I mean, if we're talking like projection play, Drew Gray, me ranking him at 17, that's what that is. I mean, we've heard rumblings about I hope for some increased velo coming back from Tommy John surgery. We know he spins the ball very, very well, and so really it's just I'm viewing Drew Gray as a really exciting draft pick still. That maybe he just has some more coaching. He has some more like pro coaching in him, and I really like that as an upside play. And I think that Drew Gray is a guy that you can rank any number of ways, and you can view in any number of ways. I'm really excited to see him kind of get after it in probably extended next year, and then make his way up to Myrtle Beach, hopefully by the second half of the year or so. I'd love to see that kind of come to fruition.
Yeah, I'm with you. And honestly, I think we were robbed of, and I mean, Drew was too, robbed of a pretty impressive season. Like
Yeah,
he was getting comments in spring camp that people were like, this is Kyle Harrison of the Giants. Like that kind of level of just comes into full season ball and just kills it.
yeah.
Um, so I hope we see that this year. I'm again, anybody in the top, anybody that we ranked, they're really good. Even some
Mhm.
people that we didn't. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason why you went 38 and I went 40. You gave some extras too. I didn't give any extras, so you have more
I
guys
did,
included than I do. So, but
but
like,
I
there's a
didn't have to
reason why.
rank them.
Yeah, there's a reason why we had to go this deep, right? Because the
Oh
system
yeah.
is very, very deep now. Moving down the list, I've got Jordan Wogu ranked in the top 20. He hit number 20 for me. You have him down at 35. I think my thinking with Jordan Wogu is I am Jordan Wogu might be the guy I'm most excited to see play in the upper levels of the minors next year. I am so excited to see him and how he performs because the swing is still just a little wonky. He still just does things a little weird. And up to this point, it hasn't hurt him. This past year in 2022, he improved in every single offensive statistic that he could possibly improve in between 2021 to 2022. And look up any number, and he improved in it. And that means something to me. Like that means a whole lot to me. I know he's a little bit old for his level. I know he was in high A, and he was a college draft pick that went, and he's just kind of climbed the ladder very, very methodically. So he's going to be older than average age. But man, like he's performing and he's getting better. And when he was drafted, we knew he had that power potential. We didn't think he could play a lick of outfield, and he can play a decent outfield now.
He can
So
play center field
yeah,
decently.
there's some value in Jordan Wogu for sure. And I think with him is I'm waiting for him to get up to Double A and then eventually Triple A, and see if pitchers can exploit that swing. Because based off I am 100% not a scout. I can't see a way. It looks weird to me, but I don't know how a pitcher can exploit that swing. But I'm also not a pitcher or a pitching coach, so
Right.
I don't know if I'm missing something. And you think that that's a possibility?
You know, I might just be too low on Nwogu because even as I was doing his report, I was all these things were really positive. um, and that's not really fair to him. I think the age is something that I've been having a question about, but again, that's not that big a deal post COVID, right? Like you're off a year. Is that really that big a deal? Like everyone is off a year. I think the thing that maybe gives me a little bit of hesitation is the Cubs had some opportunities to send him up higher a few different times last year,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't want to do that for whatever reason. Now, maybe he was just rolling. It's like him hitting here in South Bend versus Double A, like who really cares? But that gave me some pause for like, why aren't they? Because that would make a lot. There were a lot of situations where it's like, there we go. This is Jordan Wogu's opportunity, and it wasn't. Again, I could be reading too much into it, but 2023 will be a big year for him. Double A, most likely. Rule 5 eligible at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So.
Next year is huge for Jordan Wogu. It's a big year.
Yep.
Going down our list here a little bit, I want to hit on Chase Strumpf.
Yes.
Because I have Chase Strumpf. I know we I don't want to get too deep because we talked about him earlier. I have Chase Strumpf at 25. You did not have Chase Strumpf listed. I think that I've already kind of explained my like why I really love Chase Strumpf. I guess what do you want to see Chase Strumpf do differently in likely as long as he's not selected in the Rule 5 draft, we're looking at Chase Strumpf in Iowa in 2023. What do you want to see him do specifically next year?
I mean, it's got to be cutting down the strikeouts because, like, if you look at a second base / third base profile with high Ks and like some power, the players that are most successful in that role are ones that add a ton of defensive value. Like you look at Matt Chapman, he's going to strike out a bajillion times, but he's really, really good defensively. And Chase isn't bad, but he doesn't add a ton of that extra value other than the versatility of playing a couple different places. He's also a right-handed hitter, and that can limit you as well. So, like, just if you cut down the Ks to an average level, then the rest of the profile plays up really well, and I think he's a really, really good player.
Yeah.
I think he's a good player already, but that's probably my big, like, hey, if he did that, I would think very differently of him than just where he is currently at this point in time.
So I want to transition to a guy where I had Strumpf at 25 and you had him out, to a guy that you have at 28 and I have not included, and that's Bailey Horn.
Oh, yeah.
You included Bailey Horn at number 28 on your list. What do you love about Bailey Horn?
Yep. So Bailey Horn's in my like reliever trifecta. It went like Estrada, Zach Lee, Bailey Horn. When I was creating my list and I threw them out to different baseball officials in different places, he was named that they were like, oh, you're a little low on him, and I had him, right around the 30s or whatever. He's just is really, really impressive. So he throws from gives a really good angle with his fastball. The breaking stuff is really legit. I think he's a big league pitcher next year. I think he's got that potential, and I just think there's a lot of value in somebody that can come in as a left-handed reliever, throwing, really solid swing and miss stuff. So I probably am going to be the high guy on him just because I got that message a couple times, like, hey, you're a little low on Bailey Horn.
And actually, I'll use this as an opportunity to kind of run down your list a little bit, because you have, in addition to Horn, you have 4 other guys that I did not even include on my top 40 at all, but you've included in your top 34. So Bailey Horn, you had at 28. Hayden McGeary, you have as the 30th ranked prospect in the system, which Talk about power, man. I mean, like
Huge.
if Alexander Canario's out, which he will be the first half of next year, does that mean? I mean, I know Matt Mervis still exists, but does that mean Hayden McGarry now has the best raw power in the system?
I think so, or maybe Owen Casey. I think
Yeah.
Owen. I think
Yeah,
Owen grows
that's
into
fair.
it honestly next year. I think he really explodes. But yeah, like right in that discussion, it's just
Hayden McGarry seems
unbelievable
to already
power.
have a fan club going.
He
So
does. There's some folks that are like the Hayden McGarry enthusiasts, and I
yeah,
respect the hell out of that. I think that's great. No, he's really exciting, really interesting. He comes from a different profile. Every once in a, like every year, we see a couple of those late round draft picks from different places that just like pop. And I think he's got that potential. So again, just somebody that I kind of threw out there that people were like around draft time, they're like, that was a stud pick.
to
And
remind
so
people out there listening about, I saw someone posted, I think on, I don't know where it was on, but someone posted a screenshot, and I didn't realize Baseball Reference did this, but they have a leaderboard, a home run leaderboard for like most home runs hit total in baseball,
anything.
professional
Yeah.
baseball, like MLB, minor leagues, foreign leagues, college, like whatever. And Hayden McGarry is like on the top
He's like
10.
fourth or something
Yeah,
crazy.
he's definitely
Yeah,
top
yeah.
10
It would be top
of
10. Yeah.
most home runs hit in baseball this past year. So that's
Watch out,
exciting.
Aaron Judge. He's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah, it was like the list is like Aaron Judge and like Hayden McGarry. It's like, all right, that's
Yeah.
no, it was like Aaron Judge, Kyle Schwarber, Hayden McGarry. So
I think like Matt Mervis was
oh,
right
Matt
there.
Murray. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was. It
because
was.
it included like AFL and everything. Like
Yeah.
it was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Moving down, you had McGarry at 30. You also have Chris Clark at 32, which is fun, man. I love that you have
Yeah.
Chris Clark at 32.
Dude, I feel like he's somebody that just that is a really good pitcher. And he strikes out about a batter an inning. But he like doesn't walk people.
Mhm.
And if I'm looking at a guy that is like, hey, maybe he comes up, he's a 2-3 inning guy, that's what you want to see. Like that's the kind of profile. Plus, that curveball still hums. I mean, it is probably the best curveball in the system. And you can get away with that, especially if he's playing up in short relief. Like I think he still starts, but he's a guy that could kind of get squeezed into more of a piggyback long reliever role. Yeah. Like honestly, don't look at the ERA. I'm not too concerned about that. I'm looking at the strikeout to walk, the K percentage minus walk percentage, and it's good. So I think that's a guy that probably is a little underrated, and we see him, into next year.
Yeah, throws a lot of strikes.
Tons of
Throws
strikes.
a lot of strikes, and the reason why he threw so many innings this past year is because he keeps pitch count down. He
Mm-hmm.
only threw 3.5 pitches per plate appearance, which is one of the best in the entire farm system this past year for the Cubs. Pretty high, like really high ground ball rate. According to Baseball Reference, batted ball numbers, he had a 58% ground ball rate, which is extraordinarily high. So if he can keep the pitch count down, if he can keep getting ground balls and not letting the ball get out of the ballpark, then that's a recipe for success for sure.
Yep.
All right, I want to move down. 33. The next guy on your list is Mason McGuire, which I love, dude. I love that you had Chris Clark here. I didn't have Mason McGuire. Mason McGuire just for what it's worth, he was one of the next pitchers outside my top 40.
Okay.
I had some other position players ahead of him, but he was probably going to be the next pitcher listed. Mason McGuire. I mean, it's fun. It's fun having a little Mac in our system.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So he was a guy that a little behind the scenes when we were doing our Cubs on deck little text chat.
Mm-hmm.
He was a guy that I was going based on draft reports. And I even threw out there to you and Brian, like, yeah, I'm not as confident on him and all that. And like, I was even making my case for like Tyler Slafer higher. So this is full transparency right here. And then, but it got me thinking like, maybe I should ask around. And so I threw his name out and I threw a couple other people's names out that I had kind of heard some buzz on. And people were like, you're sleeping on him. Like he's got all the building blocks to be really, really good. And we kind of went through a little bit of stuff and I was like, oh, I totally have been sleeping on him. And looking at him with kind of some of the stuff inside, outside, whatever being described, and then compare it to other similar people who have popped in the past. Again, I'm not looking at like specific data, but just kind of like the discussion points. It's like, oh, this is a guy that really could make a huge push. a bit hot takey, but I threw in our Northside Bound prospect rankings, and I was like, I think he goes into full season or spends the majority of the season in full season ball, and I think he has like some really good success there. So yeah,
That'd be
man, I'm
huge.
buying it. I'm buying it. That's a big pick.
If Mason McGuire can come up and spend the majority, like you said, spend the majority of the season in Myrtle Beach and hold his own, or do better than hold his own,
Right.
then I mean, that's a top 20 prospect for sure, like for sure.
Yeah,
you know,
it'd be a big profile.
He was drafted out of high school last year, so that's major. I mean, he's at this point, like he's already jumped up your rankings a good 20 spots or so in the past couple of months, right?
Yeah. Oh, like past couple of weeks.
yeah. All right, moving down. Your last guy that you have that I do not have is Riley Martin. You have Riley Martin at 34, and I'm glad you have him here because I mean I have been leading the Riley Martin hype train since the day he was drafted. I mean, I just love a good story, right? I love the kid drafted out of a D2 school, signing for what $1,000, what it was, and $5,000, $1,000, signing for no money, basically. And Riley Martin is just fun, man. And he not only is he fun, but he performed very well in that piggyback multi-inning reliever type of role.
Yeah, the Cubs did a lot with him. So first of all, Riley Martin, totally great guy. If you have a chance to interact with him, folks, like he's awesome. I had a pleasure of talking to him early in the season when he was talking about what, he was really starting to pick up a lot of what the Cubs were doing. And he is interesting because he's a cut ride guy, not a super cut ride, but that relative cut. So the ball looks different from a fastball perspective. And for anybody, we're not going to go into too deep in cut ride, but think Justin Steele, if this is a term that you're not familiar with, like how the ball just kind of moves a little bit differently than you'd anticipate. If
you're a listener of this podcast and you're going to be listening to Greg Zumach every so often, you should definitely get familiar with the term cut ride for sure.
Yeah, it'll be on my tombstone. I think we've got some good, exciting stuff coming on Northside Bound about cut ride here pretty soon, but we'll leave that for a future conversation. So he's a cut ride guy, picked up on the slider. He's just a good dude to follow, and he's succeeded. And because he was older, that's going to push him down less. But he was older when he was drafted, and where he's moving up, he has a long development timeline. Like, he has a long time before he's Rule 5 eligible. So you get some time to really kind of keep working with him and figure out where his ideal place is. I think he's a guy that settles in the pen in like a long relief role, but he throws lefty. He's got some interesting pitches. And like, that's the type of profile for somebody who just sticks around baseball for like 10, 15 years. So yeah, I think Riley Martin's really fun. I'm glad he's on there.
Shout out QU Hawks. I love to see a Quincy University guy make a top prospect list. I'm all about that.
Definitely.
All right. So I want to get down. I have two guys actually that I included that you did not deeper down on my list. I have Luis Verdugo at number 34, which I had to find a way to get Luis Verdugo in here because I mean with Verdugo, you're looking at a guy that was kind of like we wanted him. We were pushing with all of our might for him to be that like next top shortstop prospect a couple of years ago. That didn't work out. He didn't perform very well with the bat, and he just kind of like that didn't work out very well. Flash forward to this year, and he was South Bend's most consistent hitter for the last 4-ish months of the year, 3 months of the year. And meanwhile, he was playing terrific defense at third base. He was putting the ball in the gap. He still has some room to build out his frame and hit for more power outside of the ballpark. Luis Verdugo is a guy that like I don't want to get too high. Like I'm not. This is not a guy in my eyes that I could push up and a whole lot higher on the list. He was never going to be a top 20 guy in the system for me right now. But it's all just kind of hanging around there. It's just kind of like his potential, his profile, just everything about him is just kind of like I'm ready for him to kind of take off a little bit, you know. And he's Rule 5 eligible this year. He will not be selected. But as I think Brian kind of highlighted it in last episode, like he used to be a guy that was selected in the Rule 5 draft several years ago.
Yeah.
Like that guy that can play some shortstop, that can play some good defense in third, short, second. Meanwhile, he hits at a decent rate, and hopefully he kind of takes off a little bit more in future years. Like that used to be a draft pick. I don't think he will be this year, but I'm really excited to see him play in AA next year for sure.
Yeah, I honestly, so he was in my discussion. He was like right in that next group. I couldn't pull the trigger. And maybe I'm soft on him. Yeah, he's a guy that if he pops next year, like I think we should be looking back on it and being like, yeah, duh.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited you put him on there. I think that's great. I think that's an excellent call.
And then one other guy I had, we're going to come back to one guy at 36, but at 39, I have Parker Chavers, who, I mean, like, I have him on my list and you don't, but also it's at 39 and you didn't go 39 deep. So like you get a little bit of a bit of a break there, but
39.
So Parker Chavers he's kind of become a favorite of mine. He to me passes the eye test hard. And I kind of I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, but I talked a little bit about this with Mike on Cubs PS Plus earlier this week, where I'm as big of a stats nerd. I have my own spreadsheets keeping track of minor league player stats over the course of the season. Like I'm into the stats hard, and there's still a lot of value in like that traditional quote unquote old style, like old guard way of like scouting, right? Where they just pass the eye test, And I mean, the best scouting, the best front offices, I'm not anywhere near that, combine both, right? They combine the nerdiness of the stats and the launch angle and the exit velos and the vertical approach angle or vertical angle and everything combined with the fact that, man, he just looks good. I've compared Parker Chavers' swing to Bryce Harper, just like the way his swing looks like Bryce Harper.
Yeah.
Parker Chavers is not Bryce Harper. He is
We're
not
gonna edit
Bryce
that
Harper.
to take the knot out of it.
He is not Bryce Harper, man. But just from a swing perspective, the swing reminds me a lot of Bryce Harper. The torque with his midsection looks really good. I think the way he can play pepper with that left center gap, like going opposite way, is great. Now he's not the way I talk about like Brennen Davis playing pepper with that right center gap. He's not doing it like that, right? Like Parker Chavers is like hitting line drives over the shortstop's head, not like hitting it off the wall in left center field. There's a difference there, but there's just a lot to like. He was an older guy and he didn't perform very well in a very, very, very small sample size in Myrtle Beach last year. I don't care. I don't really care. He's coming back from injury. He's been on my radar since the 2020 draft when I thought he was going to get drafted in the 2020 draft. And then he didn't, went back to school, and now he's with the Cubs. And I really like Parker Chavers.
I loved him in the 2020 draft. I wasn't writing, like this until later in the year. But I really liked Parker Chavers. No, I like him. Honestly, the only reason I didn't rank him higher is just because the injuries. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about, where he just had a consistent amount of injuries. I would love Parker Chavers to take off because that wouldn't shock me. Like the tools are there. And you brought up like the eye test versus the analytical thing, and that's something that I've had folks talk with me about there as I've tried to get a little bit better at what I'm doing. And so they've said like, hey, there's times just go and do the scouting thing. Don't look at the data. Like if you got the data, don't look at the data. Just look at, in fact, sometimes it's even more valuable to see a guy on an off day than it is to see them at their best. And so like just write what you see. And so like you look at him and he looks really good. So he's a guy that all of a sudden like something clicks next year. Yeah. I think if he gets one healthy year, we're going to see him look very different. Yeah. I really hope it happens.
Yeah. And we could see him in AA for sure at some point this year if he stays healthy. So last guy I want to talk about, actually, I think it's kind of appropriate for this to be the last guy. You look at our list, and we had 4 guys that we had ranked in the same exact slot. We already covered Kevin Alcantara at 3, Daniel Palencia at 11, and Alexander Canario at 14. And the guys up higher, it's more likely that we were going to get them similar here. We have the same guy ranked at number 36, which is weird and like just by chance that happened. We both have Nazir Muley, right? At number 36. And I think it's appropriate to end this podcast talking about him because it's like it's so unknown. It's like, what is he going to be? We know he's a freak athlete. We know the Cubs are at least like tinkering with the idea of keeping him both hitting and pitching. I had to include him there in the top 40, but like it's gonna be fun to see what we have in a two-way player in Nazir Muley.
That was so crazy. So full like behind the scenes as we were doing the draft stuff. So first day of the draft, it was like lockdown like all day. Outside of like a little bit of time because I wanted to spend some time with the kids, but like outside of that, it was just like lockdown. And we did our telecast, and then we did the after stuff. It was pounding away and stuff. Second day, all day, I was about to get on a flight in a few hours, and so like I'm walking the dog around, and that pick comes up, and I stop what I'm doing because I could not believe they took Nazir Muley. I was just like, that guy is unbelievable upside. The data on it. If you look at where Mason McRae, draft guru, that's out there on Twitter, fantastic what he does. Put a whole bunch of data. He puts a lot of data out there, which is great. And so he was looking at how average exit velocities, this is in the high school level, and then compared to like bad results. So like whiffs and chase, doesn't really matter. It's kind of all in the same boat there. So he put those in the bucket and those in average exit velocity. And he, like Nazir Muley is right around the elite of some of those players. Some that are still associated with swing and miss, but like we're talking big time potential. But his average exit velocity and like the next guy on the list was like that. Like it's not close. Yeah. So he's got super upside. The two-way stuff is crazy. I mean, he was a guy that I had like a few guys that I was like, I don't care where, he has to be ranked for me. Like I had to have him on there. It's kind of hilarious we both had him at 36.
Yeah, that's kind
of what do you like about it? Like, what do you think they do with him?
I like him as a pitcher, man. I know the exit velo numbers are crazy. I like him as a pitcher. I think that and he's not, the odds of him staying a two-way player are like, it's better to assume that's never in a million years ever going to happen, and then be pleasantly surprised if it happens a little bit longer than what we expected. You know what I mean? I like him as a pitcher. The exit velo numbers were great as a hitter, but like also he's running it up there with the fastball too. Flashing a little bit of good of some good off-speed offerings too. So he's not just like an athlete that throws gas. He's not like that necessarily. That I'm Hunter Green, but I'm using that in a negative term. But Hunter Green is really good. But you get my point. Like he's not a thrower, right? He's an actual pitcher. I don't know. I like him as a pitcher. I like him as a pitcher, but just the fact that he's a freak athlete and he can run too. He won't be playing shortstop. If he's a two-way guy, he will not be playing shortstop. He'll be DHing and all that good stuff. But man, like he could go play shortstop if he wanted to. Shoot, like I don't know.
I mean, he is like the same thing as Mason Wynn of the Cardinals to me, where he was a guy that a lot of people liked him a little bit more on the mound than at the plate. But he's playing in the field now and putting up like right around league average, maybe like exactly league average. Offense is somewhere right around there, and cannon for a shortstop, right? Like cannon for an arm. So I don't know. Yeah, like I'm with you. I generally lean pitcher, especially with what the Cubs are doing from the pitching development side. But I could also see him just kind of being the guy that like really just wants to be in the field. And then man, some kind of blowout, you bring him out in at the 8th inning when you're down a few runs, like it's no joke.
yeah, for sure. So I just thought that was appropriate to kind of end with him because of just the mystery that is Nazir Muley, you know. So
absolutely.
We will end it though. Seeing the fact that we just kind of went through our top 40s here over our prospect list over at Northside Bound. If you guys are out there listening, be sure to check those out. Be sure to give Zumach, where can people follow you on social media?
Oh man, I mean, if it exists. I think I made that joke earlier, but it's been an hour and a half talking Cubs prospects. So I'm usually at Ivy Futures of some kind. So like at Ivy Futures on Twitter, Ivy_futures on Instagram. I've had to start throwing that one out there. Obviously, you can see me on Northside Bound. We've got a Discord link too, we've had some really good, cool conversations with some Cubs prospect talk in there. I'll throw the link out, sometime when this drops as well. So feel free to join that up. I think we've got some really cool conversations, some cool prospect folks in there too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where you can usually find me.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can find this podcast. I've been a little more active than I was with the old show. I've been a little more active. Cubs on Deck on Instagram. And I think that we're everywhere where you can listen to podcasts, except for we're not on Amazon Music yet, which I'm still working on that. I'm having some issues. But if you are an avid Amazon Music podcast listener, reach out to me. I'm sorry. I'll try to do my best to get it on there. But if you guys can go out there and leave a rating and review, we got an outpouring of reviews after that first episode, which I am very, very, very grateful for. Thank you guys so much. If you can leave a review on Apple, on Spotify, on any place that you can leave a review, please do so. Also, critique us. Like I said last episode, like we are just getting this thing off the ground. We should know about what we're doing wrong, what you guys want to hear early on so that we can do more good things more often. So reach out to us, DM me, DM Zumach, tell us how much you hate us, all that good stuff, and we'll fix it for next episode.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, though, we'll be back in 2 weeks from today, staying on that consistent 2-week schedule, the Tuesday schedules. But thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon.